His Excellency said that his principal object in coming to Longwood had been to obtain an answer from Count Bertrand and offer, which he had made on the 28th of the month, to put up a soldier's barrack 70 feet long, which might be formed as a temporary gallery to walk in until an answer arrived from England relative to building the new house. That he could get no reply from Bertrand, but a shrug of the shoulders. The Count Bertrand had been very violent in his language, and had not merely asked for one or two things, but had insisted that everything should be put upon the same footing as during Sir George Cockburn's time, that the Emperor would not stir out unless permission were given to him, Bertrand, to admit persons by his pass into Longwood, that he should write and hold correspondence with whoever he liked, go where he liked, enter what houses he liked, in fact, do what he liked in the island without any restriction. He then asked if I had heard anything from him of the conversation which they had held with the commissioners. I replied that I had not heard him mention even their names. His Excellency said that it was very extraordinary, as General Bonaparte had made some very strong remarks about them too. Mr. Balcombe saw Napoleon again in the evening. He complained of pain in his teeth and cheeks, which he attributed to having taken a walk in the garden for 10 minutes. Proposed to him that the barrack should be erected. He replied that he stood in need of exercise in the open air and not in a covered gallery, that he had caused a gallery of a league in length to be built at Blank in France, but that it had not answered the purpose. Moreover, that in summer the billiard room became so hot at 5 o'clock in the afternoon from the rays of the sun penetrating through it as to render it impossible to remain there, that a wooden barrack would be worse, that it would therefore be useless to erect it, as the shade of the trees was what was desired. October 1st. Saw Napoleon in his bedroom at 8 a.m. He complained of a dull pain, dolore sordo, in the right hypochondriac region, immediately under the cartilages of the ribs, which he said he experienced yesterday morning for the first time. Sensation in the right shoulder, which he described to be more of a numbness than of pain. Slight inclination to cough. Want of rest at night. He said that he felt as if he wanted to lean or press his side against something. Vorrei appoggiarmi qualche cosa contra. Gums spongy and his legs a little swelled. Pulse 68. Appetite tolerable. Said he felt something in the right side which never was there before. Told him that it might probably be owing to costiveness, and recommended a dose of physic, which I said would be proper if it were the commencement of a liver complaint, the prevailing disease of the island, that if it increased and were accompanied by other symptoms, there could not be a doubt of its being hepatitis, in which case it would be necessary to have recourse to proper remedies, which I specified, together with abstinence from wine and a suitable diet. He shook his head at the proposal of physic. I told him that if it were hepatitis, it must not be neglected, as if not taken in time, it would terminate fatally. He replied, almeno avrò questa consolazione, che la mia morte sarà un dishonor eternal alla nazione inglese, which has sent me to this climate to die under the hands of a blank. I observed that he ought not to accelerate his own death by refusing to take proper remedies. He replied, Ce qui est écrit, écrit from above. What's written is written from above, looking up. Nos journées sans compter. I answered that according to that doctrine, all medical aid was useless. He made no reply. With respect to diet and abstinence from wine, he observed that he was a man who had never committed any excesses either in eating or drinking, that he drank very little wine, however, that he found the little he took was absolutely necessary, always finding himself better after it, and was convinced that if he left it off, he should sink rapidly. He then went into a saltwater bath and had a long conversation with me upon medical subjects. The 20th, the 2nd. Napoleon felt relieved by the saltwater bath yesterday, continued much in want of rest, recommended exercise on horseback. Saw him again at 10 in bed. His legs were a little more swelled than in the morning. He would have taken another bath, but there was no water. Had eaten scarcely anything. Slight headache. Third, examine the right side and perceive that it felt firmer to the touch than the opposite one. There was also a tumefaction evident to the sight, which when pressed hard gave a little pain. Napoleon said that this was observed about 2 months since, that he had thought nothing of it and attributed it to obesity, but that now, from its being attended with pain, he imagined it might be connected with enlargement of the liver. I recommended calomel, frictions to the extremities, diligent use of the flesh brush, hot water bath, a continuance of antiscorbutics, a gargle, exercise on horseback. Napoleon said that the governor had written to Count Bertrand yesterday stating that he, Napoleon, might go off the road and down into the valley, but that the same privilege was not to be extended to his officers unless with him. Mere trickery, said he, when I recommended him to profit by it. It would only expose me to more insults, for the sentinels do not know me, and every old soldier who wished to fulfill his duty so as to clear himself of all responsibility would say, Halte là! Is General Bonaparte amongst you? Are you him? Oh, then if you are him, you may pass. Thus should I be exposed to daily insults, and be obliged to give an account of myself to every sentinel who thought it right to fulfill his duty properly. Besides, he has no right to impose more restrictions upon questi signori than upon me. By the paper which they have signed, they only agree to subject themselves to such restrictions as are or may be imposed upon me. Moreover, I do not recognize his right to impose any other restrictions than those made by Admiral Cockburn, which were approved of by his government, unless he shows that they are signed by the Prince Regent or the ministers. For if he has the power to impose what restrictions he likes, he may, according to his caprice or upon some pretext, which to him would never be wanting, lay them on again and make them worse than before. This is one of the reasons that I have not taken exercise, in order to leave nothing in his power to inflict. I do not choose to subject myself to the caprice of a man whom I do not trust, and who is my personal enemy. Besides, I never would go out without sending Gorgo to ascertain that there was no danger of being stopped and assaulted by sentinels. I asked permission to call in Mr. Baxter to see him. He said that if the symptoms increased, he probably would, as I wished it, provided that the governor did not interfere with it. If he did interfere, never. The fourth went to Plantation House according to order and gave Sir Hudson Lowe a written report of the state of Napoleon's health. After having read it, he said that there were too many details in it, that I must make out one which could be made public. Said that he had received a long letter from Count Bertrand containing arguments similar to those which I was in the habit of using, and in which there was an allusion to Lord Liverpool, which, when coupled with circumstances that had taken place some time ago, looked as if there were some correspondence in that quarter. I said that Napoleon had always declared that he believed Lord Liverpool and Sidmouth to be better disposed towards him than any others of the English ministers. That indeed I had never heard him speak ill of any of the English ministers nominally, excepting Lords Bathurst and Castlereagh. The fifth saw Napoleon in the morning, who was much in the same state as before. Count Montsalon, Count Belmain, and Captain Gore had a long conversation together. The sixth, Napoleon, nearly the same, again recommended him exercise most strongly, and told him that if he deferred it much longer, the swellings in his legs might increase so much as to render him incapable of taking it. That if he mounted on horseback and rode, I was convinced all the swellings in the lower extremities would soon disappear. He assented to this, but declared that until things were put on the footing they had been in Sir George Cockburn's time, or equivalent, he would not go out. That he was determined to leave nothing in the power of a man who had been mad enough to prohibit him from speaking, and who, at his caprice, might order him to be blindfolded to prevent his making a reconnaissance. That the restrictions were chiefly upon the morale, and not the physical, as he might go into the wood when he liked, but that considering the person he had to deal with, he was convinced that if he did, he, the governor, would find some pretext to insult him, and he would leave nothing in his power unless matters were put as they had been before. which would be an acknowledgement that he was not to be subject to his caprice. I took the liberty of observing that he was like a man tumbling down a precipice who would not lay hold of a rope within his grasp, by which he might save himself from inevitable death. He laughed at this comparison and said, "Que le sort se fausse, nos journées sont comptées." He's like, whatever luck will have, our days are counted.